Hey guys, how's it going? Clayton here at etrailer.com, and today we'll be taking a look at, and I'll walk you through how to install Roadmaster's direct connect base plates on our 2020 Jeep Wrangler. So our base plate is going to be one of the key components to our flat towing setup. We'll have our base plate, our tow bar, our safety chains, our supplemental braking system, our wiring, and our brake light switch. So our base plate here is going to have a really nice black powder coat finish. It's going to hold up well over time and resist rust and corrosion. It's also going to look nice underneath of our vehicle. Our base plate kit is relatively easy to install as well. In terms of installation, our base plate kit really isn't that bad. We don't need any major tools. There's only a little bit of cutting and drilling. Most of our cutting is on our underbody panel here, and there's only 2 or 3 holes we have to open up on our frame. To start our installation, there's going to be 2 plastic push pins on the top of our bumper cover. I'm going to use a small flat blade screwdriver, but you can also use a nylon pry tool. So we'll just pry up on this little plastic tab. It can be kind of hard to get into this little area. If you take your time, you'll be able to get this clip out. I'll repeat that for this side as well. So now I'm going to take a body trim panel tool and pop off 6 fasteners up underneath our bumper. And these will span across the front of the vehicle. So next we'll have 1 push pin fastener. This will be on each side. It's a little bit easier to get your pry tool through the back side. And we can pry that off. And we'll repeat that process on our other side. Next we'll be removing this 8mm bolt. There'll be 1 on each side. Now with our bolts removed, we can take off our underbody panel. So next we're going to remove our bumper bolts. There's going to be 4 on each side, located here, and on our opposite side. This is going to be an 18mm socket. It is kind of hard to get up here and work. You might have to try a couple different combinations of a ratchet and extension, an impact, or a wrench. And now with our hardware off of our bumper, we need to remove this electrical plug before we take off our bumper. So we're going to push down on that tab right here and pull it apart. Now while we're pushing down on the tab, we can unplug our fog lights. Now with all of our hardware out and our plug undone, we can remove our bumper. It's a good idea to grab an extra set of hands, just in case. Now we can set our bumper off to the side. And now we can go ahead and remove our frame stiffeners. There will be 2 16mm sockets on each side, so there will be 4 total when you add both sides. And these will not be reinstalled, so we can set these aside and just put them in the trunk of our vehicle. Our next step will be to remove this rot guard. Our instructions say that there's 2 bolts on each side, but there's actually only 1 on our vehicle. So it will be 1 16mm bolt. We'll take that out on both sides. Then we can just give a tap to our rot guard, and that'll pop right off. So in our instructions, there's a line for our underbody panel that we need to cut out. We'll cut this out. This will be mounted behind our base plate. So we'll take an angle grinder with a cutoff wheel. We can go ahead and break this off. Then I'll go ahead and file that down to where we have a straight line. With our panel trimmed, we can go ahead and install this here with our supplied hardware. We can lift our base plate into place. Our instructions say to enlarge this hole here and this hole here with a 1/2-inch drill bit. We can go ahead and take our drill bit and get started. And we will be doing this on both sides of our frame, on both sides. Before we add our hardware to our top holes, I'm going to go ahead and hit it with some black spray paint just to prevent any rust. We won't do that on all sides. Now, with our hole spray painted, we can go ahead and put our base plate on. We'll be using our factory hardware for these holes. We'll just get that in hand tight, do that on both sides, and then repeat for our passenger side. Now with our hardware hand tight, I can come back and tighten it down with our impact. You want to make sure not to over tighten this, as we do want just a little bit of wiggle room to move things around if we have to. Now we're ready to add our stud to the top of our base plate. We'll take our flat washer, add that, put our stud through, add our spacer, slide it through our frame, add our spacer to the other side, push it all the way through, add a flat washer, a lock washer, and our hex nut included. Then we can go ahead and tighten these down with 19mm socket and wrench. Now we can add our stud to our second hole down here. What we're going to do is add our flat washer, slide that through to the other side. We can add our flat washer, our lock washer, and our hex nut, and tighten these down the same way we did the top with 19mm sockets. And you want to do this on both sides. Now we're going to take our hex bolt with our lock washer and our flat washer and our handle nut. Our handle nut, I bent it kind of like this to where we can get it flat against the inside of the frame. We're going to stick it up through this hole. You'll kind of have to look on this side and find the threads. You might have to bend it a couple times and adjust just to get the thread started. And then you can go ahead and thread in our bolt on the other side. With that threaded, we can hand tighten it and then come back down and tighten it down the rest of the way. This will use a 19mm socket just like the rest of our hardware. Now ready to come back and torque everything down. All of our torque specs will be listed in our instructions. You'll repeat that process for all of our hardware we installed. Now with all of our hardware torqued down, we can go back and break off our handle nuts. Just have to wiggle this around, and it'll break off. You'll want to do that for both sides. So our bumper actually would line up with our holes. So just a good tip is you can loosen up all your hardware, take a screwdriver and kind of pry that base plate whichever way you need it to go, and it'll kind of shift around, and then you can tighten your hardware back down, and now all of our bolts line up perfectly. So before we cut our underbody panel, we kind of went off our instructions. We're going to make a little bit smaller box than the instructions say, and then if it doesn't fit quite right, we can come back and trim it up later. So I'm going to take a hole saw to radius our corners. Now I'll repeat that for all four corners. I'm going to take a Dremel tool and cut along this outside line to cut out our square. That's going to do it for a look at and installation of Roadmaster's Direct Connect base plates on our 2020 Jeep Wrangler.